it all started all fine, seemingly.
Fine, in inverted commas.
Until I pooped my pants because Jack Doohan crashed his car.
Yeah, it was really, really, really disappointing weekend for Liam, but it kind of just reaffirms what we've been saying since day one of this podcast and for so long, that Red Bull car is a hard car to drive.
Oscar overtook him in the last few laps of the race, and I don't know who was commentating at the time for Sky F1, but they were like, wow, how dare you be that bold and brash against a 7-time world champion.
In the wet.
It was very
Did you
clear
see the video of
gonna...
Fred doing an interview and then the umbrella like turning inside out and him blowing away?
Oh, yes. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 4 of the Drive to Thrive podcast. Today, we're going to be recapping the Melbourne Grand Prix. What a crazy race weekend that was. Today, we're recording this on Wednesday, so we're a bit delayed in terms of the information and giving you our reactions. However, we do have our own lives to live, so we'll be quicker in the future, hopefully.
There's a lot to digest as well.
There's been news that's come out in between as well, so we'll give some maybe a little bit tidbits on that. But overall, we want to recap the race, talk about the most interesting points, and talk about all the various different DNFs that and crashes and rain and debacles that went on throughout the race. So
yeah, let's make a start. The winners and the losers, or as we're stealing from our namesake, Drive to Survive.
Yep, stealing from Christian Horner, is it?
Yeah,
winners and
wankers. So there was so much to digest and take away from Melbourne, but I think it was impossible almost to name one winner and one wanker.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I don't know if you agree.
Well, no, we've got our own winners and wankers, haven't we?
So who do you think your winner is from the race weekend?
For me, I think a lot of people will say some obvious names, but for me, I'm going to say Alex Albon, and I'm going to say Kimi Antonelli for myself, because Alex Albon, Serena Williams so far up there. Again, I still am a bit lost in terms of who's P4 and who's P5.
I think Albon's P5 and Kimi's P4.
But
it was
saw
swapped.
Something swapped, and then I heard it swapped again potentially. So
no, it definitely has. So Kimi did finish P4, but then he got a penalty for an unsafe release in the pit lane on the last round of stops. But then Mercedes contested it after the race
again,
and it got swapped back. So Kimi finished definitely P4 and Albon's P5.
Wait, so hang on. So there was. I saw. It doesn't matter.
Right.
We won't get into it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, it doesn't affect China. So yeah, that's all post-race stuff. We're reacting to the race today.
Yeah.
During the race, regardless of where he's P4, P5, Alex Albon did a smashing race.
I agree. I would say Alex Albon. And so I've got 3 winners. So I agree with Alex as well. I think that was a big FU, silence to all the haters, because he's been getting a lot of negative press because obviously Carlos has come into the team and everyone's just been doubting his ability and how is he going to fare against a better teammate. So that was just a big, show to everyone that James Vowles has made the right decision to pick him, and he drove phenomenally well. And obviously we'll come on as we discuss about what happened in the race, the team strategy and the right calls they made, because it was a collective effort. But my driver of the day, hands down, was Kimi Antonelli. I was so impressed with him going from P16, was it, to P4. He was one of the only, him and Ollie Bearman were the only rookies to keep it on the track the whole time, and to obviously come up through the ranks. Obviously Ollie Bearman finished dead last, so and to finish straight behind George Russell as well, that was just a sign to Toto that he's not come to mess around. He had a few little wobbles throughout the race, but he managed to save it really well. So yeah, Kimi Antonelli for me was the definite winner. But obviously I think it's also a winner is Lando. We'll obviously get into it, but we can't discount the race he had, because I think he drove phenomenally well as well up against the adverse conditions. So yeah, there was definitely a few winners, but definitely a long list of wankers. I think we should start calling them losers so we don't get banned from swearing all the time.
I think with the winners and wankers, I quite like it. Because sometimes there is, and the wanker that we've chosen today is thankfully, we're not starting it off horribly.
Yeah, it's not actually like a personal attack for once.
Yeah.
And this is not the Lance Hate Stroll Club.
No,
so
it's not.
he actually did quite well.
He did very well.
But yeah, our collective loser
the
of
wanker
the day
for today is the no slip paint that is on Melbourne's white lines. I did hear something, kind of soundbite the other day, that apparently it is not FIA approved non-slip white lines that
Clearly
are on there.
doesn't do its job.
Because for most of the time it is a road race or a road track or whatever, something like that.
A road race,
so that's why plenty of people were having banana peel kind of level slips throughout the race. So that is number one wanker.
Yeah, but that's also brings us on nicely to all the people that DNF'd in like the first quarter of the race.
Yeah.
Due to the rain, obviously, but the non-slip
Yeah.
paint definitely was a contributing factor. So I think the best place to start was the carnage that ensued from the formation lap with Isaac Hajar.
Yeah, unfortunate for Hajar. He did really well in qualifying.
Yeah, he did. He qualified very well.
I still think he's a good person in terms of supporting, following for Visa Cash App WhatsApp Racing Bulls.
Yeah.
However, I know I did say in my predictions the other week, I do think he's going to be out potentially.
Our predictions have not aged well.
Mine have done all right.
I'm not sure about mine.
I said doing and
well, we both
Hajar
put
out.
Stake dead last.
I didn't.
In the championship.
I did.
Yeah,
I said
yeah.
he wouldn't have 0 points.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
So
and look at him now.
I think Hajar drove a brilliant weekend up until the formation.
Qualifying. Lap. I mean, we don't have much about qualifying. Qualifying was pretty uneventful in terms of everything that went on. It was almost looked as business as usual in qualifying. So we're glad that Sunday was a completely different race to how qualifying was. But yeah, he had a really good qualifying. But unfortunately, lap 0, he's not even got a DNF. I think his is classed as a DNS.
Did not start. Oh, it's so brutal.
Because he crashed on
It's so sad because you only get one shot. You only get your first F1 race one time. And for the fact that obviously it might make him feel better that so many other people went off. Like most of the other rookies, Alonso, Sainz, they all went off. So that surely has got to give him a bit of an ego boost in the sense that it's not necessarily his ability.
He's not going to be as hard done by.
Yeah, but it was absolutely brutal. And when they showed him walking down the through the paddock after, just bawling his eyes out, they followed him for so long, and it actually nearly made me tear up because Anthony Hamilton went up to him and like consoled him that whole like catwalk down the paddock when there was hundreds of cameras in his face, and obviously he was so upset and he just wanted the world to swallow him up, and he just didn't want to deal with anyone, and I did find the media circus around him at that time pretty brutal, but it was really, really heartwarming to see Anthony Hamilton just put his arm around him, whisper some words of encouragement in his ear, and that's got to mean the absolute most to him, because obviously Lewis Hamilton's his idol and someone he's always looked up to. So yeah, really, really tough for Isaac Hajar. Really unfortunate that he DNS'd on his first F1 debut race.
It is, but it was tough tracks, tough weather conditions. It's a lot of pressure, and hopefully, if we get a dry track in China, which it not always is, it can be a way to see everyone's true potential next week in terms of a normal track.
It's only race 1 out of 24 season. Like everyone's, straight away, McLaren are going to get both championships.
Yeah.
I'm still think that's still all up to play for, to be honest. But it's it felt weird. The race just felt like there was so much drama and so much happened, so many DNFs, so many strategy calls and rain, but I just felt like the race never actually got going. Like it was very stop start. There was no red flags, was there? But there was so many safety cars and laps behind the safety car. The safety car seemed to take forever to come in every time it was out. So I'm not mad that Australia won't. I don't think they're opening every race of the season. I think they're going to alternate with Bahrain, which I think's good, because that just is giving me PTSD from Australia a few years ago. I feel like they always have similar type of races where half the grid DNF and it's just chaos.
Yeah, it's a tough race. But it's even more pivotal this year when there is so many rookies. As we were saying in the predictions video, how you start can sometimes impact how you move on.
The mentality,
pressure, and all that kind of stuff. And Hajar's probably got a ton on his shoulders. But like you said, the pressure comes off a little bit when so many of the people that are, good drivers, well practiced, still had issues as well. I think some of them, not all because of themselves, technically.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate thing with Hajar as well is like the comments from Helmut Marko were so critical, and it's actually really some people on social media this week have been like, well, you know, he wouldn't be in that seat, he should be expecting the pressure and the bad press and the stick. But for Helmut Marko to basically come out post race and say that it was embarrassing, that he was emotional. How old is Isaac Hajar? He's got to be in his teenage years. I want to say 18,
very
19.
baby-faced, yeah.
And I just think even, like, we saw Lewis Hamilton cried at Silverstone last year. We saw Lando Norris cry last year. Like, I don't think we should be discouraging these sportsmen and sports personalities to hide their emotions when it's their whole life. They're devoted all their lives, you know, like Oliver Behrman's come out and openly said that he has no friends back in England because he had to move away at such a young age, and they've invested so much into the sport. And for something as upsetting as Isaac Hajar DNSing on his first ever race, the emotions are going to come out, and we should be encouraging that and embracing that and supporting him in dealing with those emotions, not just calling him embarrassing. So but anything that comes out of Helmut Marko's mouth is just disappointing at times. Funny sometimes, but
in a way, we probably should have put him as the wanker this weekend.
Yeah, he just was spouting his mouth so much, wasn't
that came after the race, so we can't really put him in there. Yeah. Or it might have been shortly after in a interview / report. But yeah, unfair. And Anthony Hamilton, father figure, knows what to do, and thank God he did do that, because maybe going into next race, who knows what Hajar's mentality could have been like. But because of Hajar and his incident, we went into the race, and it all started all fine, seemingly.
Fine, until, in inverted commas.
Until I pooped my pants because Jack Doohan crashed his car. And I obviously had made the bet last week. I will shave all of my hair off if they replace him after this first race and put Colapinto in.
You'll shave all your hair off?
I'll shave all of my hair off. That if he gets subbed out for Colapinto before China, I am going to shave all my hair off. It is Wednesday. He currently still has his seat. 3 days. But I did see something posted by BWT Alpine the other day showing Colapinto in an Alpine race suit. Could have just been testing. It could have been whatever. It could have just been because he's the cool boy of the team. But please, just let him race in China so I can keep my hair.
That just teaches you a lesson not to make bets.
We'll see.
But yeah, speaking of Doohan, then obviously he went out. Was it lap 1?
Lap 1.
Yeah, straight away after the start.
Yeah.
Spun out. I don't think any of us were necessarily surprised, but it was still unfortunate to see because again, it's his first. It was not his first start because he did Abu Dhabi last year, but his first home race as well.
Yeah,
and
2 Aussies on track.
Yeah, there's the Australian curse. Like, they've not had a podium in so many years. Yeah. So I think the whole crowd were rooting probably for Oscar, but also Doohan as well. Like, at Silverstone, we root for all three of them.
They would have been all for Doohan, and if Doohan, they're all back on Oscar, kind of all this kind of stuff.
And then it seemed to, like, after the 2, like, crashes or, you know, when they went off the track, it seemed to kind of snowball for the next like 20 laps where there was just constantly people sliding off. And then I think straight after Doohan was Carlos. Wasn't that the same lap?
So Doohan crashed, from what I understand, when you look back at the replay. He basically just, again, being a bit of a rookie, not being in these conditions, and probably the pressure as well. I think he just put the throttle down a little bit too much, caused his wheels to kind of spin up, and then he just kind of did a full 360 into the wall. But yeah, Carlos was completely different, but kind of similar. He wasn't even racing at this point. He was under safety car conditions because of Doohan.
Right.
So he was on lap 2.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, I over the radio hear this, and I've not heard the post analysis in terms of like whether that was the case or not. But he said that he had a massive torque when he put I think when he was upshifting or something like that, and it caused like his obviously the car to over kind of compensate, and again it spun him out. Carlos is such a good driver, so well experienced, but again it's showing between the difference between getting into a new car, having all these new kind of buttons, mechanics, and all that kind of stuff. That might have been what thrown him off, but the car equally could have had hiccup as well. And unfortunately, not even racing, we lost Carlos.
It was shocking, and it was almost like before we knew it was a mechanical issue as such, we were just like, if what Carlos is going off, then everyone's going to go off. It's free game, like fair game, like everyone's going to go off. But then when he explained it was something to do with the upshifting, part of me thought, is that why like Williams have struggled? Because obviously Sargent and Colapinto in that second seat had so many DNFs continuously? Is it because the car is quite clunky to drive and awkward to drive, and it takes even someone as experienced as Carlos and Alex, because they are obviously a similar experience as such, who can handle it when the car does have those quirks and don't put it in the wall? But yeah, it'll be interesting. I really, really can't wait to see Carlos do a full race, because that Williams finished P5, almost P4. Carlos, I think, would have been right there up there with Alex, definitely.
Yeah.
If they'd have played the strategy right. And then after those safety cars and the rain the track seemed to dry up, didn't it? And we got a few laps of racing.
There was quite a while in terms of from 2 till about around the 30th laps, because they were on inters all the way for 31 laps. And it was kind of drying up, but it took so long to dry up. And when it did dry up, it was still only really like tram lines. So cars were going to struggle to overtake. However, I can't remember what lap it was, but Kimi Antonelli, again, had an amazing overtake on Alex Albon.
Yeah, he did.
Which has been covered everywhere on social media and on various different broadcasts. So obviously people still can make moves when the weather is like that. They are on intermediate tyres, but everyone was basically just driving around on a Skate Electrics track on these dry lines, waiting for it to fully dry out and then get onto some slicks. But yeah, it was quite uneventful apart from some radio chatter part way through the race. Yeah,
and then we kind of get to the midpoint of the race. Well, not even the midpoint, I'd say the last third of the race. And it started to rain again, didn't it? So the likes of Alonso, Lawson, Bortoletto, they all spun off within a few laps of each other. I think everyone was really surprised when Alonso spun off, because he's the most experienced driver on the grid, up there with Lewis, isn't he? And I think it was lap 47 when Lawson and Bortoletto spun off. So I think, to be honest, for Lawson, he was probably just glad the weekend was over. He's had such a difficult weekend from start to finish. Like, obviously, he qualified all the way down, was it P18? And then I think they changed something with the rear wing to try and give him, more pace and all that kind of stuff, and it just didn't play off at all because he was so far behind Max. So yeah, it was really, really, really disappointing weekend for Liam, but it kind of just reaffirms what we've been saying since day one of this podcast and for so long, that Red Bull car is a hard car to drive.
It's still, again, it's a bit unfair to kind of judge it, because it was, the qualifying wasn't great, and also the outcome wasn't great in terms of him coming off around lap 47. It's still a lot, though. He'd gone 47 laps, and Alonso had crashed out before him as well. And I still don't really understand the reason why Alonso crashed.
I don't.
Obviously, weather conditions, but I don't think anyone else had any more rain on the track at any point, or I don't know whether his tyres had gone off, etc. But for him to survive to that point was really impressive. And I think that is when the class 3 rain was starting to come down. So everyone was going to struggle at that point. Even you heard Leclerc over the radio saying, "Oh my God, that's quite a lot of rain, class 3 rain." Yeah. So we all knew everyone was going to struggle. Alonso, a bit confusing. Again, no light torque issue. There was no upshift issue. It just seemed like he just lost control of the car and went straight into...
It was surprising that Alonso DNF'd and then Lance finished in P6.
Yes, it was, but that is exactly what I was saying in the prediction videos, that sometimes Stroll can just pick up some points.
I know, I just completely wrote him off, completely. I think as well, out of Lawson crashing out and having such a bad quality, there has been so many memes on the internet with Yuki Tsunoda and Perez, because Perez is always, obviously Perez got terrible results last year, and he's almost like, haha, like I told you. Yeah. And then it's just, I'm really not... Well, I'm undecided if Red Bull have completely dropped the ball with not promoting Yuki into that second seat, because if you think about the history, like, Yuki had a really strong weekend. Yep. And I think RB, apart from Hajar obviously not starting, collectively, they had a really strong weekend, and it was really unfortunate that Yuki didn't get points and finish in the top 10. He was definitely up there in terms of pace. But I don't know what he has to do to be promoted into that second seat, because if you look at the last 2 years almost, obviously Nick de Vries came in, he beat him, did better than him. Ricciardo came in under the proviso that almost if Ricciardo did well, he might be promoted up again. He got shipped out. Then we've had Lawson, and he's doing better than Lawson straight away.
but it is one race.
I know. I really want to see Yuki either leave Red Bull this year or get promoted up to Red Bull.
Thing is, he's in a car that still looks, again, it's not going to be a podium chasing in a sense consistently, but it seemed competitive. Both Hajar and Tsunoda doing very well in qualifying. All qualifying, everyone's kind of pace looked similar-ish. Obviously, there were some outliers in terms of McLaren right at the front. And we're still kind of saying that maybe the Ferrari is second in terms of pace. But I think everyone's got a good chance this year to start fighting points off each other. So if Tsunoda's got the grit and the determination, I think he could still pull off some good kind of between 10 and 5th place points this year if he can play his cards right.
I think speaking of people having points, which I just can't believe it, Sauber, because of Hulk, obviously Bortoletto crashed out at the same lap as Lawson, which again is similar to Doohan and Hajar. It's unfortunate that on like your maiden F1 race you don't finish, but he obviously managed to get 40 odd laps in and have a quite surprisingly strong drive. But you called it in your prediction with Hulk being up there, because in the construction championship as it stands, Kick Sauber are above Ferrari in points. Like, I cannot believe that. No one would have predicted that. People would have predicted Hulk.
I mean, not for the end of the season, but first race.
People would have predicted Hulk up there because he was strong in Haas last year. But the fact that the team that I thought would score no points at all this year
was Sauber,
have now outscored Ferrari on the first race of the year.
And there is multiple tracks where it is very difficult. The weather is not always guaranteed, and it shows that experience sometimes just wins out, and especially in a season when you've got so many rookies and some cars that aren't that reliable, i.e. we saw how the Williams turned out. It just takes that one or two old heads to know what they're doing, and to be like, drive sensibly and make it.
To jump in.
One of the things that was interesting though, again we've spoke about him a lot, was Antonelli. So Antonelli, as a rookie, I was saying last time, here's the star boy, but we need to see how he goes. He's going to be, I say it's going to be determined how his first 3 races go. He's 1 out of 3 so far for a fantastic race. Can he do the same in China? Can he do the same in whatever's the 3rd race? I can't remember. But, and then I think he's set for the season to do fantastically then. But I've got faith in him. He went off the track. He spun around. I think his rear tyre touched the grass, and he managed to save it, and it was an amazing save for a rookie. We saw a lot of the others have the same kind of loss of traction and binned it into walls, whereas Antonelli's just got this insane natural instinct for the overtaking and all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to see that he has the instincts almost like the old heads in terms of how to keep it on the track.
People say he's the next Max Verstappen, and I can see why after this weekend. Like, he had no fear and impeccable skill.
Yeah, I think Ted was saying that in like a race interview, everyone was like asking around all the rookies, how you feeling about with the rain coming, impending rain, and he was just like excited, like a Labrador, just like get me in the car, I want to go, kind of thing. Throw the ball.
Doesn't faze him.
So yeah, it's interesting that he has done so well. Who was the other? It was just Ollie Behrman. Other reckon who kept it on the track.
He kept it on the track, but he finished stone cold last because Haas's strategy was just wild. So they knew this Class 3 rain was coming, and some teams called it early. Some teams held on, like your Ferraris and Red Bull with Max. I think if you can hold on and keep the slicks on through the 2 laps it's raining, and then you're winning, aren't you? But that is such a risky decision because, and I don't know why, we can come on to Ferrari now. I do not know, and Haas made a terrible strategy choice. I don't know why Ferrari stayed out so long. Yes, the rain the heavy rain only lasted a few laps, but we saw under the first set of rain, it took so long for the track to dry up. So they knew that the slicks, they wouldn't be able to probably put the slicks back on. Yeah, I think that Ferrari, fumbled the bag the most this weekend for me. I wasn't surprised because we've seen it so many times before. I was just so disappointed that we're having the same strategy issues, the same pit wall to driver issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is frustrating. They've got a lot of teething issues. I know there's been a lot of memes that I've seen this week
my God, so
of
many
Leclerc
memes.
basically turning round and being like, "Ha, told you so, Lewis." Like,
Yeah,
this is what you expect
yeah.
with the Ferrari strategy teams and the race engineers.
You've not really seen Lewis, because he had such a good relationship with Bono that took him years and years and years to build. He's then going to a team where English isn't their first language, and it was surprising to see Hamilton get so mad on the, like, so frustrated so quickly. Like, the amount of times he was like, "Leave me alone." Like,
Yeah.
and it is, all the memes have been, well, like the classic Ferrari in the clown suits, and Charles being like, this is where you come to die, basically.
The thing is, it's unfair because obviously the race engineers are right sometimes, because they were clearly, one of the things that went poorly in the first part of the race, first half of the race, was Leclerc was falling behind because he wasn't looking after his tyres. The race engineers were saying over the radio that, hey, you need to be careful of them, and Leclerc was kicking back like, no, just leave me to it, let me race. The same way as Lewis was like, just let me get on with the race, stop talking to me, kind of thing. So clearly there's a miscommunication between the drivers and the race engineers, but in that instance for Leclerc, the race engineer was right. Like, you need to look after your tyres. You're losing out on pace, and in a couple of laps, you're not going to be competing with people. And I think some points he was like almost like half a second behind the pace because he'd not looked after his tyres. So it's like there is an element of the driver needs to get used to their car and actually physically just learn it without having the chatter in the ear. So I understand where the frustration from Lewis and Leclerc comes from. But it's going to be hard to distinguish when sometimes I go, right, no, he's saying something true here. Clearly, he's got the data.
Yeah.
I need to be listening to that person because, again, what weather's going to be coming in a second, what drivers are pitting behind me, etc., pitting forwards. Like, they're the strategy. And again, it's hopefully, as we see more dry races, more normal races, that communication will start to gel a lot better. I think if there's more confusing races earlier in this first half of the year, it could end up being a bit of a clown fest the rest of the year for Ferrari, unfortunately.
Oh God, it's so exhausting that they're having the same issues continuously, and they have done for years and years and years. I just don't know why they find it so hard to be like strap mode P5, Lewis, or like all these weird codes, and you just like, what does that mean? And Lewis is just like, Lewis and Charles want to turn around and tell them to F off, but they can't because they'll be fined 50 grand if they do.
Exactly.
So Lewis was constantly like, when he was like, K1 available, and he's like, yes, I know, just leave me alone.
He's like, can you drive K1 now? And he's like, I'm not close enough, mate. Just let me drive
the car.
the race.
He's
Like, I'm not testing a button
yeah.
to try and, make your data look good or see something. I want to try and make some points in places right now. So
the Charles Leclerc one, when he was like, there's water in my seat, i.e. do I have like a broken seat or a leak? And they were like, must be the water.
It must be the water. And it's
just know Charles was just like, oh, for fuck's sake.
He's come back of like, oh, let's add that to the words of wisdom. Clearly he's at the point of now like, oh my God, this is just what the Ferrari race engineers are like. He just knows it's going to be a meme. So yeah, that was frustrating for Ferrari. I think it's interesting to touch on the reason why strategy didn't work out so well for Ferrari. The big elephant in the room was lap 44, where everything seemed to be going quite smoothly. We were worried about Verstappen being on the heels of the McLarens, and we even saw Verstappen have a wobble at one point, which allowed Piastri to go in front, I believe. But lap 44, when we thought all was going well and we heard about this class 3 rating that was coming and we was kind of testing it, I was most worried for Lando because I was like, he's going to be the first one to hit the rain potentially, unless the rain starts and obviously another part of the track where the back markers might pick it up in a sense.
It all just depends where you're at on the track and
when the rain's
when you
coming.
can dip in and pit,
And unfortunately, it did happen that they hit the patch of rain in slicks around, I don't know what turner, but lap 44. They went off into the kitty litter, both of them almost simultaneously synchronized swimming. Lando managed, and thankfully, caught it back, carried on going, but it was like Oscar was on ice skates. And he came off, it looked very similar, same speed and everything,
literally
same
exactly
to
the
him.
Same,
but his car just seemed to just keep sliding.
Go all the way across onto
it was
grass.
on rollers. And I was like, how is it doing that? I know it's wet, but like it's not that wet, surely, like the rubber would grip. But no, it just went off. And he got beached on the grass, and everyone was like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, but did you hear the crowd? Like the crowd was insane.
They were in shock.
Yeah,
I was in shock
thought it was
because he's
DNF
in
at
my
that point.
F1 fantasy team with 2 times points.
You
So I
thought
was
you'd
like,
screwed it.
I'm screwed because so many of my rookies have crashed out as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
I'm going to have minus points for days here. But obviously, Verstappen then went in behind him. And then they started the whole pit lane. When are we going to come in to do?
When people got it right, people got it wrong.
Some people got it right, some people got it wrong. Thankfully, Oscar Piastri, for the Australian fans and for him and for McLaren, the genius to start reversing out rather than trying to go out. I know he frustratingly was trying to go forwards to begin with, but as he reversed out, he managed to kind of unbeach himself.
Yeah.
So thank God he managed to do that. But because of that, that showed to everyone, well, not everyone, because this is where Ferrari messed up on their strategy.
Yeah.
We're going to have to come in and get some inters. Just as you're saying, Danielle, it's not going to dry up fast enough.
No.
Verstappen and Ferrari thought, well, maybe we can take track position and maybe it will dry up quick enough. But the ones who played it right were Mercedes, it was Norris, and it was Albon. And I think it was Albon was thanks to Carlos, was it not?
Because Carlos was on the pit wall and he said, you need to bring him in now. And if it wasn't for that, that's what James Vowles has said.
Even though he wasn't there anymore and he'd only done 2 races, but he knows the car. I guess he knows the car well enough now to have that instinct to be like, no, you need to bring Albon in.
Yeah.
And Vowles says like it was a team effort, and there's clips of Sainz running from the pit wall, running back in, like, come on guys, we've got to get them all out, get the inters kind of thing. So
I love Carlos so much because he's completely like embodied that team, hasn't he? And he's just seems like he's starting from the ground up and being involved in everything. And he knows he's in a team that finished 9th in the championship last year, but he's so determined to do well. And
he's optimistic. It's great about him.
It's good to see. It's great to see. But yeah, the 2 McLarens having a bit of a squirrely moment kind of just caused a tumbling effect, didn't it? In the pit lane, in the conditions. Then obviously around similar laps is when Lawson and Bortoleto went off as well, which caused the safety car. So Ferrari completely got the strategy wrong. I also do think that Lewis, he has issues with his race engineer, and obviously there's issues to iron out there in terms of the communication styles, because it's going to take him a long time to build up the relationship that he needs, that he had with Bono. But I also don't think Lewis had the pace this weekend at all. Like, even from quali, he seemed to be off the pace. So it'll be really interesting to see where Ferrari finish up next weekend. In my whole, like, delusional state, like every Ferrari fan will be in now, I read a stat the other day that McLaren finished like P7, P8 last year in the first race. And then obviously they won the constructors and were fighting for the drivers by the end of the year. So I'm like, Ferrari are finishing around like P8. It's fine. We can do this. We can do this.
I don't think we can. But
they've
got a good car. They've got a good car, and hopefully there's still. I don't think we could base the whole weekend is just baseless. Like, I think the only thing you could say is like the McLaren is competitive.
Yes,
but I just think everything else is still, you can't judge it off Melbourne. We need a dry track, we need a good race, and we need to see actually how it plays out
as well.
Where you can overtake, and obviously different cars have different strengths. Like, for example, I think they're saying that the Williams are going to struggle next weekend because in China, because of the longer corners that they've got. Yeah, they've got great straight line speed, but they're not as good in terms of long corners. If they can do short, quick turns, great, like and kind of stuff, but their car's not set up for that. So again, there's going to be different races where different cars have strengths, but I think McLaren just seems to be running away with it no matter what the track. It could be pretty good in a sense.
Hopefully, in that first stint before the safety car, I think they'd already pulled like 14 seconds ahead of Max. So it was insane, the pace that they had. And then obviously when Oscar came off, he was literally beached for over a minute. He came back on track by some miracle. He was over a minute behind. He was getting lapped, and he somehow made it up to P9.
Well, he was helped by Lawson and Bortoleto
and the stops and Ferrari messing up and everything. So, but yeah, it doesn't take away from the fact he had great pace and he was able to get the fact. I honestly thought he was either DNF'd or his race was over. So the fact he even managed to claw back some points, I would put him down as a winner of the weekend. Well, he's a loser in the sense that like he bottled like a P2 podium, but he's a winner in some sense because he managed to still get points after beaching the car and didn't put it in the wall like Alonso and Sainz and all the others. And then obviously Lando, I think he is the definite, as well as like Alex and Kimi, which we've mentioned before. But for me, he is such a winner of this weekend because he drove a phenomenal race. He didn't bottle the start, which he has the reputation of doing. He survived multiple safety car restarts with Max Verstappen hot on his heels.
Which is not used, he's a reputation for not being good at that.
Yeah, and like if you think on the first stint, he had a 14-second gap, but then the safety car bunched everyone up, so Max Verstappen was literally right there, and he never got past him. So I think McLaren had a really great strategy-wise. The only thing that I didn't like about, and I think this is going to cause some issues, is I'm sure there was one point in the race, I can't remember what lap, but Oscar was basically given team orders and he wasn't allowed to race. And then later on down the line, a few laps later, he was allowed to race, but then he was too far back from Lando to be able to compete with him.
See, I know.
So I think they are going to struggle to manage the driver dynamics.
I don't. I think this is the same as any other team ever. Like, if you think that there's a team behind you that's going to like, they were saying that Oscar was faster at one point, but is that because Oscar was faster or because Lando was looking after his tyres? Like, because he knew the race was going to go on and it was so unpredictable. There's always a point with anyone's race where no matter what the standings are, let's not make them too scrap, because we actually have someone like Verstappen or George Russell behind us. We need to just play it safe where we are so we don't get overtaken, because if we do start racing right now, we both might be out of the points in a sense, or both might be out of a podium. So everyone's kind of downplaying all these papaya rules right now, saying how it's going to screw over the season. I don't think it is. I think they were both driving perfectly right there, and when they did turn it around and say, right now you can race, I don't think it was just so they could defend Lando. I think it was because it's like, let's defend our team's position as a 1-2 in a sense. And I hope that is the case for the rest of the season, that when they know that they're both safe at the front, that then they can go, right, okay, now you guys can go fight if you want to fight out and fight out fairly. But if we need to do a strategic defending of our positions as a team, as a constructor team, then let's play it safe no matter which way, even if Oscar's in front and Lando's behind. I don't anticipate that they're going to go on, Oscar, just let Lando in front so we can have the drivers. I think they're going to be fair in that sense.
We'll see how it plays. Like I said, there's 23 races to go.
There is.
I also, like I've said before, you cannot discount Max, because he definitely outdrove that car this weekend.
He did.
Compared to, like, obviously where Liam was at in the standings. And the fact that I think if there'd have been 5 more laps or less, or a few more racing laps, he would have been on the back of Lando, but I don't know if he'd have been able to overtake, because the track was like a go-kart ring where you had 2 tracks.
This is I've heard this quite a few times this week, like, give it 5 more laps, but guess what?
We didn't.
There isn't 5 more laps.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, though,
in the set amount of race, McLaren was the better car.
They managed to pull away initially, but Max caught them back up after the pit stops and the safety cars, so he was helped by that. But I do think if anyone's going to beat the McLarens this year, it's probably Max.
Yeah, he's got a good fight for it. Look, Lewis and Leclerc still could. Once we get into a dry track and we go with normal conditions, we could still have that. But the results were the results. The McLaren was the better car on the day, and I think it still would have been, without that slip up in the rain, it would have been a 1-2 with them going forward.
Agreed.
So, we're going to have to see how it goes on. And, Max equally had frustrations throughout the race. I don't think he had any issues. He had issues with tyres at some point, I think, and he was talking over his team about that, and they were looking into it. And then
I think they kept him out quite long as well, didn't they?
Yeah, so there was the point where the crash happened at lap 44, and then they were like, oh, great, you just stay out kind of thing. We know you're like the wet track master in a sense. We've got faith in you, just stay on the slicks. And obviously Mercedes, Norris and Albon made the different choice, and I think that cost them. I think it might have been a different situation. You could have said, if there's a few more laps, Verstappen might have got them. I think it would have been if Verstappen pitted at the same time as everyone else.
Yeah,
he would have got them potentially. I think that's where they missed up on their strategy.
He was trying to be like the driver of the day, wasn't he, and stay out on the slicks. But I can't remember when that actually worked. I just don't feel like it ever does, to be honest.
It's worked when there's been rain and then the rest of the day's hot kind of thing. Like even if you get a sprinkler rain, but I don't even think it sounded like Australia that was that warm that day, or Melbourne was that warm. So it was very clear.
Did you see the video of Fred doing an interview and then the umbrella like turning inside out and him blowing away?
Oh yeah, so
it
obviously wasn't normal what we think of Australian weather conditions. And then but thankfully their team did say very, very, very last minute box. So he did come back in for Max, and he got some inters and he went back out and he got back racing. So it was interesting to see.
There was a time when it was a 1-2 Ferrari and I was just like, oh my God. And then I was like, but they've not pitted and everyone else has pitted. And then when they went in and they were just down. It was a miracle Lewis even managed to finish P10, to be honest. Like,
finished P10, and that is it stands out again. Even though he had fresher tyres, Oscar overtook him in the last few laps of the race. And I don't know who was commentating at the time for Sky F1, but they were like, wow, how dare you be that bold and brash against the 7-time world champion.
In the wet,
clearly,
in the conditions.
Oscar's got the determination.
So determined.
I'm so glad that he did do that, and he shows that, I'm equally, like we said in the last, I'm equal to Lando. I've got just as enough skill and competence in the car. So really excited to see how all of this translates into a normal race at some point.
But we'll see what China's going to be like. So the interesting point about China, which is obviously just in a few days' time, they're changing the rear wings, aren't they?
Yeah.
So again, I'm not an aerodynamicist or any kind of mechanical or technical expert, but the gist of it that I've got is the weight on the rear wing. At the minute, it can move 5 millimeters, but when they put weight on it, it's only going to be able to move 0.5 millimeter. So they're reducing the amount the rear wing can move when it's got weight, or like I assume that's from the air.
Yeah.
So, and what is surprising is they've introduced this change so quickly, because normally it's in a few races and it's in a period where you have like maybe it's not a double header. So the fact that the teams have got to change the rear wing so quick, I don't understand how it works. Like, did they have that rear wing ready in the back? So
I think because wings have been talked about so much already, I would believe that teams like Ferrari and McLaren already have a wing ready to go that would be considered
they're just going to make
like
a new
regulation
one now,
safe. Post that you shared this morning interested as well, as we're recording on the Wednesday, that there's been potential delays with delivering the cars to China.
It was
so
McLaren, Mercedes, Aston and Red Bull. They don't have the cars. They normally get the car on a Monday night or a Tuesday morning at the latest. It's now Wednesday and they don't have their car.
Yeah,
and FP1 starts in 2 days.
It's happened before, but obviously to this extent with so many teams involved, it's quite crazy. And
like, what will happen if half the teams don't have the car? Like, surely they have to postpone FP1. Like, it's not fair teams not getting their car there, or is it their responsibility to sort?
I would imagine, I don't know, it depends when the cars would arrive. If they're going to arrive, there's so many things they're going to have to set up. That's the thing. It's like if the cars arrive, say this evening or Thursday morning, the teams are just going to have to work overtime to make sure it's ready. Say if the car wasn't even there by when FP1's starting, there's so much to set up. So like, how can you delay FP1?
Yeah,
you can't really.
No.
So I think it's going to be
at a disadvantage. Because they've got to
yes, because they're going to have to try all different setups and that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I believe they'll turn up on time. And I'm sure
the mechanics will just work around the clock, won't they?
China will want to do everything in terms of making sure that it's not a fiasco. It's not the team's fault. It's kind of just how everything's planned out with the logistics. Hopefully they can get it sorted. Hopefully we don't have more drama that in the China F1 Grand Prix. So,
but it is back, and I thoroughly enjoyed the race weekend, to be honest, and
just
excited to see how this season. I think by the summer I'll be so invested in, even more so than I already am.
Yeah,
because it's just going to be. I genuinely can't call it, apart from if I'd put money on the McLarens winning the constructors. That's the only definite bet that I feel confident in right now. Everything else I think's up for grabs. All the positions and all the placings.
Yeah, so I think for me as well, the race weekend was so exciting. Leading up to it, it's exciting. It was 4 a.m. for the UK, so we didn't watch it straight away.
We watched it at 4 p.m.
We avoided all social media, had our phones basically
yeah.
locked, and we watched it. And we initially, when we thought we'd pulled up the recording, it was like an hour. And obviously, because we hadn't seen anything, I was like, oh, there's not going to be any red flags this race. It must have been a boring race.
That was just a preamble.
I'd loaded up the preamble by accident. Then I went onto the right recording and saw 2 hours and 49. I was like, oh God, this is going to be a good race.
Here we go.
So it was a good race. It was very eventful.
It also made me...
It hurts my heart for the F1 fantasy team because of my team struggled.
Well, yeah, so I actually want to shout out who's P1 in the F1 fantasy. So my sister, Paige, is doing very well. And yeah, hopefully we can get some more people to join, and whoever wins gets £100. So
yeah, we might pop up a graphic on the screen so we can show the
points.
standings.
And we'll show not her team, the points for the top 5, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, people, if anyone's in the league anyway, league code in the description, you'll be able to see their kind of previous team anyway. Something could change.
Yeah, true.
But we'll kind of call out who were the top 3 for that weekend and shout out how they did. I think there's someone called Patrick Castillo. Don't know who you are, Patrick, if you're listening. Thanks for joining the league. But I think you got 3 times on Lando. And what a call for a first weekend.
I just do not have the balls to put anyone on double points
on a potential wet race.
On a wet race. We knew it was going to be wet, and the first weekend. You need to see how people lie.
Yeah, so impressive.
I am regretting putting Lewis in my team because I think he was very expensive and he overpromised and underdelivered, in my opinion,
for the first race.
So I feel like Lewis might be getting swapped out.
Maybe.
We'll see. Also, I think Haas was a big loser of the F1 fantasy, because I know when I was looking at everyone's team, a lot of people put Haas in because they're cheap and they have good drivers, but they finished stone cold last, both of them. They had a terrible strategy. Ollie Behrman had a really difficult weekend, crashing out in FP1, FP2, and not even doing quali. So I think that screwed a lot of people over. And when I looked at the fantasy league, I think there's about 5 or 6 people who were on negative points.
Yeah,
that's just brutal.
My friend John Loudon, who's in the league, I think he's in last place with minus 20 points.
Oh, it's so brutal.
That sucks to be you, how you can be starting the season in a deficit.
There's a few people who've joined who didn't join in time for Melbourne, so they're almost on a level playing field, aren't they? But yeah, we're recording this a little late. Hopefully it'll be out before China, and we'll be raring to go next week when with our overview and reaction to Shanghai.
Yeah, so one last part and segment to cover in this video is the what the fuck moment.
Yes,
our what the fuck moment of the weekend. And what the fuck, there's about 7 different what the fucks that we could choose from, but we've got our big what the fuck moment. What is yours, Danielle?
Mine is just Oscar going off. Because him and Lando went off the same, but then he just kind of veered in the opposite direction. I was just like, no, in front of the home crowd, and it was just so, honestly, my heart was in my mouth. But then when he, spun it out and got off, I was, so relieved. And then the fact he managed to get points, and then the fact he overtook Lewis on the last lap, in the wet, he was in a Ferrari. I just thought, Oscar's race was the whole of Oscar's race was my what the fuck.
What the fuck moment. I think my what the fuck moment was probably, I'm going to go with Sainz, because it is a what the fuck moment. It's in terms of, not because it's crazy bad, it's crazy because of he's such a good driver, and it wasn't even under conditions where we were racing. It was literally a safety car. And I remember being sat there and I was like, how has that happened? So that was my true what the fuck moment. Normally I think we've said that what the fuck moments are when something bad's happened in terms of someone taking someone out, what the fuck. But
funny.
that made me go how is this real life right now? So poor Sainz, hopefully going into the rest of the season he doesn't have any throttle issues or any torque issues, and his car can be nice and reliable. But if he does get off, keep giving some great advice to Albon for when he's doing his race, because we want to see him up there on top of the leaderboard. Yeah. So that ends this episode.
Episode 4.
We're looking forward to reviewing China as that comes out, and then we'll have a nice break. Is it for 2 weeks until?
No, 1.
What?
And
1 week?
And then Japan. And then when we it's the Japan reaction, I will be in Bali, so I'm going to not be here. And then there's another race where I'm in Bali, because there's 2 back-to-back. There's another double header.
Yeah.
So we'll just...
There's going to be a couple of races throughout this year
where we're not here.
We might not be here, and we're going to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe just one person does it, or we do a video call, etc. We will figure out a way to get you some content.
Yeah, I've got my VPN at the ready to watch it.
Yeah, so appreciate everyone watching. Thank you for coming to look at the
week.
recap this time, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.